Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Mark Fixes Stuff. In this episode we'll be looking at the power on issue on the Panasonic 3DO FZ-1. It still doesn't work and I left it overnight. I don't think it'll be too much of a problem though, because these Panasonic machines are very well built with the highest quality components. So let's see what we're dealing with here with regards to screws. I always like to have a look first before I dive straight in. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, and you can often tell if somebody's been in before by how the screws are. That's the first one. Find the bite. That comes out pretty easily. However, the warranty void if broken or removed sticker does give me some concerns. But no, that's coming out okay, and the magnetic screwdriver wins every time. Put that to one side. Examine the next one. This one's slightly easier to take out, which does worry me. However, it doesn't always mean that somebody's been in there. That's safe, so on to the third one. And this one's a lot more solid, so maybe I'm worrying about nothing. A lot more solid in there, and still it comes out with a minimum of hassle. Up to one side and put it safe. And now the final screw. Oh, okay. There is no screw. There's no screw at all. And that confirms my worst fears. I'm following somebody else's work. So, turn it over. We'll find another screw for that once we've repaired it. Fairly confident here. Lifting off the lid. Turn, and do be a little bit careful because there's quite a lot going on inside a 3DO, Castle Grayskull as I call it. And here we are. So let's have a quick look around. First of all, we've got some buttons, and we'll take those off and put those to one side because they've got to come off anyway. Pop them over the screws so that I can knock them onto the floor later when I'm not looking. And a quick look around the machine, we can see that it is not built to a price point. It's certainly made with someone who had a lot of budget in mind. Thank you, Trip Hawkins. Now the first thing that I like to do when I'm in here is point out the screws that I need to take out to get into the board of the machine. There's quite a few here. Yep. And they all look to be the same type of screw though, so that's often easier. So let's just go for this. I've switched to the smaller screwdriver here because I find it easier in the tight quarters. This one's also magnetized, which can be a slight disadvantage when I'm going alongside dirty great big metal shielding. A couple over here. Well, all these screws, it can be a case of not being able to see the wood for the trees. I mean, there's so many screws that you can't really see what you're doing. And there's one down here. Hello, nurse. Yep, that one's out. And we should be able to lift the drive up now. Not quite. There's something holding it in. Now, I think that it's probably around the back. So let's just rotate this around so we can have a good look. Now if we look at the back here, we'll notice these tabs. And these tabs are on top of this shielding. So if we unclip the shielding from the side, it pulls out and unclips. Then what we'll be able to do is properly slide that shielding off the top of the unit. Now with that off, we can see inside the drive, and it's a really clean machine. It's not been used a lot at all. I'll just pull that forward gently and show you these two flat folded ribbon cables. If you grip them firmly and wiggle them out, they will come out. And you can move that to one side, so that's the power and the data are both on flat folded cables. Looking at machine now, we've got this massive beast to take off as well. Oh my word. We might be here some time. Okay, so let's take this opportunity to talk about the 3DO system a little bit. So it was made by the 3DO company. Shocker! And that was founded in around 1990, 1991 by a chap called Trip Hawkins. And if you don't know that name, You should, because he founded Electronic Arts. And what they wanted to do was make a CD-based video game or entertainment standard rather than a console, which would be manufactured by other companies, because, to be blatantly honest, they didn't have the money to do it themselves, to manufacture themselves. And that's always a high barrier for video game manufacturers, is to actually get your machines made. And one of the reasons, for example, Sega isn't in the video game console market anymore. So what they do is they would make it, license it out to hardware manufacturers, and then they would only charge a game maker something like $3 per game licensing to release things on the system, which is much less than Nintendo and Sega, for example. So this, there's one screw left there. So yeah, it was really, really good. It was designed by a couple of guys called Needle and Michael, and they designed the Amiga and the Lynx. So it's a good heritage, or good lineage, or good pedigree from these guys. Oh God, another one. Here we go. Come on. Don't know what this is shielding people from. Probably meteor attack. Right. Would you look at this beast? Absolutely massive. You could weigh this in for scrap and probably buy a new car. Look at that, humongous, and off to one side. So here we can see in all her glory the Matsushita Panasonic FZ-1 3DO. There's a save battery here, which is probably dead after about 30 years. I've not checked yet. On the left hand side we've got a transformer that puts out about 16 volts AC, goes into a fuse which visibly looks fine. If we look down this side, we've got a couple of regulators which chuck out a lot of heat, and that often punishes these capacitors. They're full of fluid, so it basically cooks them dry and makes them go resistive, and that can be the biggest issue with a lot of retro systems and televisions, for example. And looking closely, we can see that at least one of these capacitors has dumped its electronic guts all over the board. Its electrolytic fluid is all over the board. Now, one of the problems with electrolytic fluid is it's a really aggressive alkaline. And an alkaline is the opposite to an acid, but it does the same thing. It literally eats into the top substrate and then starts to eat away the copper and eats away all the joints. I mean, you can see this telltale yellow grey mush coming off. I do suspect it's its very smallest one, because if you look underneath, you can just about start to see the corrosion on the board, which would say that that has leaked. Okay, yeah, that cotton bud is looking pretty rank right now. So what we're going to do, I think, is we're going to take this smallest capacitor off. We'll leave that for now, although I do have a replacement. I think the medium one's going to be fine as well, but there's lots of other capacitors on this board which, whilst they don't look like they've leaked like these ones, are actually towards the end of their service life, as stated. So we will be recapping the entire board, but first of all I'm just going to replace enough to try and find the issue, and I'm going to go with the smallest capacitor in the group of three, the one that looks like it's leaked, and the one that looks like it's got some corrosion on the board underneath. There's so many screws in this thing, they're literally everywhere. There's one here on the back plane. And what else have we got here? Well, we can see that the controller port at the front is on a separate board. So let's disconnect that now. This one's a bit stiff. It doesn't seem to want to come. Doesn't want to come out. Let's have another go. Come on. Obviously it's about just enough force, but not... there we go. Thankfully these are a lot easier to put back than they are to take out, so we'll just leave that there for the moment. And let's have a look at what else we've got. We've got the transformer. It's a bit stiff, but we can squeeze that clip, take that off and put it to one side, so that's out of the way. Another screw under here that needs to come out. This is towards the front left as you look at the unit. And we've got this shielding or strengthening, I don't know what it is really, over the back ports. Take that out, put it to one side, and the same kind of shielding over the right expansion port, which also needs to come out. So let's see if we can lift the board out now. You'd think we could. No, something to, oh, this is holding it in. This clear plastic at the front, which is the light channel for the LEDs on the board to show up the access and power lights, and that comes out like, oh, there's two black clips. Pull them apart, pull it up, pop it to one side. That's a big old piece of plastic. You wouldn't see something that cost intensive these days. Now we can lift the board out. Here we go, nice and careful. Put the unit to one side and the screws in a bag, very important. And here's the board. We can finally get down to doing some proper work. Now, as I was saying earlier, what we're going to need to do is desolder at least one of the capacitors to fault find. So here's my solder tip cleaner, here's my soldering iron, and here's my desoldering pump of choice. The degauss have worn off through use, but it's the SS-02, and it's got a really helpful silicone nozzle. You see it sucks on your finger there. And the good thing about silicone is you can get it right in there, into the heat, and pop it into the solder, and it will suck the whole lot up. It takes a lot of cleaning though. So we're going to take out some of the capacitors and the battery just to test. So popping it into the board stand right now. I'll find somewhere to grip it, that is. Otherwise populated by sticky outy bits. Is that going to work? Possibly, possibly not. No, I think that'll do it. That'll do it. So these are the ones that we're dealing with. And the first thing we're going to do is we are going to have to take out that smaller capacitor. So we're going to get in there with the snips and snip it off at the legs. Now the reason for this is if you snip the capacitor off, it's much easier to desolder the legs because there's not so much thermal sinkage. Give this a clean. Wow, you can really see here the effect that the alkaline has had on the board. The black blooming around the edge of the tracks is where the alkaline has started to eat into the board. So we use isopropyl alcohol here to clean that part of the board. Now let's see what that looks like. Look, you can see that the electrolytic has eaten away at the bottom of the capacitor itself, where the writing has actually been eroded. So the board could do with a bit more cleaning to stop that rot, as it were. Now, before we go any further, what I wanted to do is show you something called ESR, which is equivalent series resistance, and it's something which is kind of unique to capacitors. It's when they age, they stop the flow of current. Now, with this size of capacitor, you would usually expect around 0.3 of an ohm in general. So it depends on brand to brand, or whether it's low ESR or high ESR, whether or not you're going to get that value. But it's got to be around the 0.3 to 0.5 half an ohm maximum. So let's see what we've got here. Analyzing. Now the ESR on this one is almost 5 ohms, so that's pretty much 10 times what you'd be expecting. And the capacitance is also nowhere near its rating as well. So I've got a little replacement here, and this is going to do the job really, really well. 10 microfarads, 16 volts, straight in. Now what we've got to do first though is we've got to clear out the hole, and I will clean it up a little bit more first. Okay, flip the board. Where's it gone now? Oh yeah, C36. That's the one we've got to take out. So we'll just heat up these pads, take off the solder, desolder the stumps of the component that we cut out earlier. So goodbye solder. And it's kind of stuck to the side there a little bit. So let's see if we can heat that and move it away from the side. Often they'll drop out. Not quite. Try again. Okay, we'll come back to that in a moment. I don't like to put too much heat for too long on a pad, something called dwell time. We'll go to the other one, melt that, get that silicone nozzle in, give it a good, yep, that's got most of it out. And again, flick it away from the side, and that one's come out already. So let's go back to this one from the bottom, heat it and push up slightly. Yeah, that feels loose. Let's just grab the grips. They're actually my cable snips, but they're closest. And we'll take that out of the way. Great, so those holes are clean now. Flip it over and look at the top side of the board. wherever it is. Where you gone? C36, come in. Your time is up. Ah, there it is. As you can see, I've cleaned the board a bit more and I've checked it out with a continuity meter. I mean, it doesn't look that fantastic, but we're ready now for the new capacitor to go in. As you can see here, we're getting the correct orientation. Positive leg is the long one and the negative leg is denoted by that little semicircle on the board on these Panasonic machines, and that's the shorter leg. It's also noted by the stripe with the minus symbol on it as being the negative terminal of the capacitor. Turn it over, find those legs sticking up, should be fairly easy. Where have you gone? Kick your legs! Where are you? Ah! Move down into camera shot. Come on! Oh, it'd be nice if I could line this thing up for the camera today, for me and you. So C36, iron on the leg and the pad at the same time, so they're both equally heated. Then apply the solder to the opposite side of the lead. There we go. That one's a bit of a starved joint, as I call it, so it needs a little bit more. Is the top one starved? No, that's fine actually. Now the whole machine needs a recap, but I think this one capacitor might be the reason that it doesn't turn on and off. High ESR. So join me in part 3 and we're going to put it together and see if it turns on. If it does, we'll see if it'll boot some games. See you there.